Chapter 21, End of the First Age. Nakal had become comfortable moving through the cold waters of Aphar. In a short time he had mastered his strokes and maneuvers. He was able to ascend and descend gracefully. His eyes acted like headlights on a submarine. As he moved his head to and fro, he could see no other forms. Nakal desperately searched for familiar surroundings. It appeared that Aphar had been wiped clear of everything. His throne was nowhere to be found. He randomly swam throughout the waters of Aphar, and because he found no variation under the water, he decided to remain at the bottom. All of the mountains, hills, valleys, and meadows had been pushed together by the waters. The mountains and hills had lowered, while the valleys and meadows were raised, making everything level. Just when Nakal had become bored with his swim, he came upon a large chasm. So maybe everything was not lost, he thought. Nakal stared into the deep. The light from his eyes was rendered useless in the chasm. The placement of the walls was not useful for the curved light. He tried to mentally dim or shut off his headlights, but could not make it work. He decided to descend into the fissure and investigate slowly. The deeper he traveled, the darker the blackness and heavier the water became. Something in the deeper water caused him to sneeze. Fire ripped out of his mouth and nostrils. The roof of his mouth stung from the force of the sneeze. Bubbles of trapped smoke rose toward the surface and popped. The sound was chilling to the only audience, those watching from the theater. What caused that? He questioned in his mind. Rashawn, where is the pillar? Why didn't Nakal find it? Sarah posed. She was fascinated with the fact that the mountains had sunk and the valleys had risen. Wouldn't the pyramid become more visible with the mountains gone? I would assume so, Rashawn began, but either Orr has blocked it from his vision, or Nakal simply did not move in that direction. Remember, his lights do not shoot a straight beam of light. I feel confident that Orr has Nakal's eyes working that way for a reason. When Rashawn began to read again, the theater filled with a flash of light. Nakemabed and Kohengal joined Jerahab around the table. How about throwing the stone now? Kohengal asked in an upbeat tone. Almost giggling, Nakemabed said, That would be splendid. Which one of us should have the honors? I think Kohengal should do it. He is the one that will finish it in the end, Jerahab gave his opinion. Let us all have a hand in it, Kohengal stated with a cheer. Yes, they rang in unison. Then the three leaned back and laughed. Should we go to the eastern gate or do it through the table? Kohengal posed. I will be leaving soon, so can we do it here? Asked Nakemabed. Of course, reassured Jerahab. He then put out his hand and a black stone materialized. Kohengal drew up the image of Nakal moving deeper into the fissure they had created. Nakemabed moved over to the side of Jerahab and touched the stone. Then the three stood side by side and spoke in unison. I have replaced your hardened heart with stone. Jerahab handed the stone to Kohengal and patted him on the back. Kohengal flung the rock into the image on the table and watched. The children's screen instantly changed. They were looking up from above Aphar. A mass was traveling toward them, but it was so black that no one could identify it. What is that? Alyssa wanted an immediate answer. I don't know, Aaron replied, but it is definitely coming this way. Shh! It's the rock Kohengal threw, Morris explained, and hoped no more discussion was needed. Rashawn concurred with Morris, which quieted the girls immediately, so he did not skip a word in his reading. The rock plummeted into the water directly above the opening of the fissure that Nakal had ventured down. The crashing noise from the splash echoed around the formless stone of fire and sent a series of vibrations across the stilled waters. Nakal heard the muted splash. Unable to identify what had made the sound, he rolled his massive body over to look upward. He floated in that position for moments, quietly listening to the hum of the blackened spot moving toward him. Who else is with me? He thought. The moving object grew larger, but not to a challenging size. My power must be back. Halt! Nakal ordered. The command did not ring out as he had anticipated. A flare of fire carried the word out of his mouth, followed by puffs of smoke from his nostrils. He knew what he had cried out, yet even he could not identify the word. That was useless, he thought. As he planned his next move, the object unexpectedly struck him. The weight of the rock pressed upon his chest. As he forcefully grabbed the rock to push it away, his sinking body twisted like a snake whose head had been chopped off. As much as he moved, he could not remove the stone. Nakal was trapped. He was plunging to the bottom of the fissure, sinking like the rock. "I have replaced your hardened heart with stone." Nakal heard this declaration echo throughout the waters as Or had cried out the words. "This is Or's doing," mumbled Nakal. "Oh, how you will pay for this." He continued to flail his body around while plummeting straight down. A burning sensation engulfed his chest like nothing he had felt before. He groped at the black stone upon his chest, only to find that it had moved under his coat of iron. He began to twist even harder. Then it happened. He hit something solid within the freezing water. His free fall was over. Nakal lay there for a few moments. His back and tail were wrenched from the landing. Slowly, he turned his shoulders and whipped his tail around, causing him to roll over. Lying face down, he tried to find his buoyancy, but had none. He struggled to stand. With the weight of his new stone heart holding him down, Nakal could easily walk upon the floor of the fissure. "My head is pounding, and what is wrong with my nose? It itches." As he muttered the words, he sneezed. Fire flew out of his mouth. Smoke rose from his nostrils. The roof of his mouth hurt more from the second sneeze. Then he sneezed again. The pain in his mouth now moved up into his nostrils. He had forgotten about the burning chest and pounding head. He sneezed a fourth time while looking down at the ocean floor. The fire from his sneeze bounced off the floor and blew away some of the silt that covered it. Nakal glared down at the spot where his sneeze had blown. With his foot, he pushed the remaining silt away and stared down at the revealed patch of unidentifiable stone. The patch was full of blackness, but a dim glow was pulsating deep beneath his feet. "What is this I see?" Nakal said out loud, not expecting an answer. "It is where your men are, Nakal," Or's voice boomed through the water. "Leave me alone," Nakal shouted back, furious that his men were separated from him. "I will, but first, know this. Your fate is worse than those who followed you. You will soon all be together, but the second age must come and go for that glorious event. For now, you will be alone, able to see them but not able to talk to them. Things will need to heat up first. No plans will be made on this day." Or spoke, and his voice boomed throughout the universe. All who had ears heard these words and the ones that followed. "Be sealed." "This day? What is that supposed to mean? What is a day?" Nakal screamed out. "And seal what?" Jerahab, Kohengal, and Nakemabed watched the walls of the fissure snap together from the bottom up. Jerahab turned to Nakemabed. "Make your way slowly to Aphar, then linger over the waters for a while. When you are ready, signal to us, and we will put forth the word." Nakemabed gently closed his eyes and nodded slightly. He breathed in and transformed into his spirit form. A streak of Nakemabed's presence could be seen as he left the hall. Those of Elenthial knew that Nakemabed was on the move, for they could trace the comet-like trail in the sky as it left the eastern gate. Jerahab and Kohengal lowered all of the images on the table of happenings, and the two of them moved to the throne room of the temple. The waters were freezing. Nakal found himself in a narrow ravine cut into the core of Aphar. "Things will heat up?" Nakal smirked as he shook his head. He has no idea how cold it is down here. Nakal swam forward, running his arm across the floor and looking for signs of movement from his men. Suddenly, the sensation to sneeze hit him again. Fire blasted out and heated the water in front of him. He swam through it, finding a hint of comfort from its warmth. He sneezed again. Stopping to rub his throat, he looked down. Movement! Nakal could see something on the other side of his floor. The sneezes were coming closer together. This time, as he sneezed, he held his eyes open, looking at the spot where he had seen something move. The blast of fire lit up the cleared floor area. Pressed up against the floor of Nakal's area was the face of Azazel. Nakal began to frantically push the silt away. He cleared a large patch and sneezed. again forcing his eyes to concentrate on the area. There was Azazel and several others beating on their solidified ceiling. Nakal knew who each of the angelics were, even though they all looked different than the last time he saw them. They were lifeless-looking figures now, each scrawny and frail. "Can you see me? Can you hear me?" Nakal screamed out. If they were responding, he could not hear them. "I have to get to them. I need my army." Without being able to communicate with those below, he could make no plans. Nakal decided to sit and think. His sneezing became so regular that a pattern developed. He had already tried using the fire from his sneezes to burn a hole through the floor to release his men, but it did not work. The longer he sat there, the warmer he became. Soon he was scratching his neck, trying to relieve the tension caused by the heat. Then an idea hit him. He pointed his toe out and scraped his nail across the floor. Those inside held their ears from the terrible screeching it caused. Nakal had no idea that they could hear any sound. He scratched out the words, "I will be back." Then he swam away. The children could not understand why Nakal had left. Then their screen split. The smaller screen focused on a patch of floor that showed Azazel and the others beating on the ceiling. A few of the girls refused to look at that screen. They preferred to watch Nakal swim in large circles around Sheol, heating the waters as he went. Rashawn paused to make sure they got the irony of what was happening. "Children, do you understand what Nakal is doing and why he is continually sneezing?" "Isn't he sneezing so he can see the blackness?" Andrew answered with a question. "Well, Nakal is using it for that reason, but Or has done this. You see, the more Nakal sneezes in this confined area, the more the waters heat up. It will be boiling before much longer. Nakal has started moving around to look for relief from the heat that he is creating. Pretty clever way to do it, isn't it? Or knows how much Nakal likes to create, so he is allowing him to have part in his own judgment." "That is pretty cool," Simon replied. Rashawn started reading again, with Nakal still swimming and sneezing. Then a loud pop rang through the theater. At first, no one was sure which screen the sound had come from. The popping increased in frequency, and what was producing it became clear. Nakal had encircled Sheol hundreds of times without any relief. He returned to where he had scratched into the floor. As he stopped and stood still, he noticed small bubbles rising to the roof of his covered ravine. He sneezed again. The bubbles slammed up against the hard surface and popped. Then he could feel bubbles creeping up his legs and tail. He sneezed. The bubbles increased, and his iron-like scales heated. The pain from his sneezing was now in his chest, throat, nose, and head. Nakal was hurting on the inside as well as the outside. The confined area had become a boiling cauldron. He was no longer able to stay in one place. He had to keep moving even though he was exhausted. In the cosmos, the Asoavel shrunk back from Nekemabed's fire, parting quickly to avoid contact. Where it did not move fast enough, his fire consumed it and it crashed down into the waters of Aphar. When Nekemabed arrived, all of the fallen Asoavel had floated down to the ocean's floor. Nekemabed reached the waters that had enveloped Aphar. He moved around the stone of fire several times and then stopped just above where the fissure had been closed. He hovered for a moment, then moved slightly ahead to where the eternal tree had once stood. He sharpened his eyes and then with X-ray-like vision peered into the earth below the waters and saw the iron beams securely holding the tree in place. With a grin of satisfaction, he began to move in a circular pattern. Nakal was frantically swimming around Sheol. His mind was racing with how he was to escape. A force of water pushed against him. He stopped, unsure of what had caused the water to flow in the opposite direction in which he was moving. "Is someone there?" he asked, hoping to see Azazel or one of his men. There was no reply. Nakal slowly started moving forward again, looking around the blackness for any new forms or shadows. Then another force of water pushed against him. "I know you were there," Nakal called out. His coal-burning eyes shot out the curved beams of lights. With his head tilted back in an odd position, he scanned the area. He found nothing. Nakal's burning scales prickled with an unknown fear. What is going on? He desperately wanted to know. I have to get out of here. With that, he moved to the ceiling of his holding tank and began palpitating its edges as he swam. He was feeling for any cracks or seams. As he moved along, he fell into a routine movement of swimming and tracing the ceiling's edge. His mind was full of thoughts ranging from excruciating pain he felt to how he hated ore. With each realization of his pain, he swam harder, whipping his tail like a propeller and knocking it up against the ceiling. Then he stopped in his tracks. He could not move one muscle in his body. He tried to cling to the ceiling of the tank, but dropped back down to the floor. He felt a series of strange vibrations, an earthquake of some type. Then the water carried a faint sound that resembled words, but he could not make them out. The children sat in the theater where the large screen focused on Nakal and the smaller on Nakal. Suddenly, Nakal blew a hard wind across the waters, and then a great light flooded the theater, shattering the darkness.